Even with the most entertaining Friday and Saturday events of the 2025 season, Monaco yet again had a very boring and great race to put on if you want to take a fat nap. The track itself has a bunch of history, and me as a very optimistic guy, I was definitely excited to see if the mandatory two-stop that we've been waiting to see will finally introduce some chaos and make it a more entertaining GP. The track itself is super reliant on actually having some rain to make it a bit more raceable, but in dry conditions and when the engineers are given a task, they end up doing it. And if you're Williams and Racing Bulls, which we will talk about, then you make this new rule something that you can use to your advantage, but the people watching end up seeing an extremely boring Grand Prix.
Mercedes saß noch so vereint und vertraut gemeinsam bei der Team Principal Pressekonferenz. Jetzt hat ihn heute so ein kleines Schnippchen geschlagen mit der Strategie, die Williams da ausgetüftelt hat.
So let's talk about Monaco's 2025 unique GP. As I stated earlier, the Friday and Saturday events should not change. Those are amazing. Seeing these drivers go to the limit in qualifying, and in general on Friday, with the crashes we end up getting and drivers having to push to actually extract the most out of a possible lap in Monaco, which is super driver dependent, makes this track fun every single season we go to it. In the actual qualifying order we had made it pretty intriguing. Leclerc was second in a Ferrari that's been struggling a lot this year. The car is a boat itself. Lando put in a great lap. This is supposed to be his redemption after a streak of not having great GPs and not winning. Alonso threw it up in P6. You had Hadjar up in P5. Liam was going for his first points. A lot of good storylines revolving around this weekend. The GP starts and actually quite entertaining. Lando almost bottles a race start with Leclerc having a great start, but as it is Monaco, which has always been the problem, there is nowhere to pass. It's such a short run into turn one. Even with the brilliant start that Leclerc had, there was no way of getting around unless you wanted to go into the barrier. But Lando does end up keeping it and taking the lead after turn one. And we saw a brilliant move by Bortoleto down at the famous hairpin. And honestly, I think Kimi was a bit too ambitious, kind of mad that Bortoleto ended up passing him. So he ends up lunging it on the inside. Now, you can debate or not whether or not this was actually a good move, but to me, it's not typically a spot to overtake. He was frustrated that Gabriel got ahead of him, and having two cars go through here, of course, the inevitable is going to happen. Somebody's going to end up in the barrier, and in this case, it was the Sauber car. We ended up having a virtual safety car right in the start, and as we assumed, some drivers ended up coming into the pits. Yuki, Gasly, Behrman, and Gabriel naturally after having the front wing damage. A lot of us assumed that these drivers were just going to go in for a 1 and a 2 stop and call it a day and then just move on. But what we didn't take into account is that plenty of the teammates were close to each other and they were using themselves as pretty much defense mechanisms for the other driver. So Yuki, Gasly, Behrman, and Bortoleto actually never ended up getting anywhere even though they pitted first, which was part of some of the strategy talk. The virtual safety car lasted till about lap 6. There was only a front wing on the track, but Gasly ends up making a mistake. He said he had no brakes. I'm not sure. He ended up hitting a bump and the car just didn't brake correctly. Ends up going into the back of Yuki, which probably gave him a little bit of damage on the diffuser. And what a catastrophic weekend for Alpine. I mean, this car makes no sense because it was really good in the slow speed stuff in Bahrain. You bring it to Monaco where they don't even have to compromise any part of their setup. Their engine has always been weakest. They've been really good around here for the last couple of years, and the car was just nowhere. I mean, Franco had no confidence, but Gasly could not extract anything out of the car. Around lap 16 is when we started seeing the strategy come into play, which is what made this GP just that much more boring. It was extremely smart on their end, but Liam Lawson ended up backing up everybody on the grid, which gave Isaac Hadjar a pit window. Through his pit window, he ended up going onto softs, which was the obviously softest compound of this weekend. And then he was able to push while Liam was actually holding up the rest of the grid, which would then open up another pit stop for Isaac. Now, it did make it a bit interesting amongst the McLaren drivers and Ferrari drivers because they needed to react as well, just in case Isaac was pushing too much, and there was a possibility of him jumping and undercutting everybody with the pit stops. So the front runners ended up pitting. Verstappen ended up staying out longer because he was on the hards. But then the back markers were being introduced into this race for the front runners because of Liam holding everybody back. This year, it was the Liam Lawson train, not the Alonso train. Speaking of Fernando, I mean, this guy in 2025, I don't think he can get any more worse luck. The car dying out, he was in the points. The strategy, by the way, by Aston Martin in this race was horrible as well. Ocon would have jumped him, he would have finished P8, so I guess it would have been points. But P6 was easily attainable if they just made the right choices. And they didn't react too quickly because Alonso at some point was the 5th quickest driver right after Oscar, Charles, Max, and Lando. So there was a lot of pace to be extracted from the Aston. He never ended up being able to show it because he had to be lifting on the straights after about lap 25. So for 14 laps straight, he was losing about a second in pace in the straight, and the car was overheating in general. This Aston car is just, what an odd car. Not that great, but also very bad on reliability with a Mercedes engine that at it. There was maybe one moment where Oscar got close to putting it into the barrier, but he did not. Honestly, the best part of the race was some of the radios, with Max talking about it being that the shifts feel like Monaco from 1972. After we saw the Liam Lawson strategy, Williams now started putting this in place. Sainz ended up backing up the field, got Albon a pit stop, then Albon did the same for Sainz. And there was some entertainment here because George ended up actually cutting the Nouvelle chicane just because he couldn't overtake Alex, and thought it would be better to end up just taking the penalty and going through with it. But the stewards thought differently, and they gave him a drive-through, which pretty much put his race into the mud if it wasn't already. I will say I think Ferrari did a good job in this race when it came to stops. Lewis got himself up to P5, and he actually had pretty decent pace. But Charles was the better driver, and Lando was on it this whole week. He was perfect in the race, and in qualifying, he deserved the victory. Per usual with Monaco, around lap 60 is when we ended up getting this whole, oh, is Leclerc going to go for the overtake? Is he going to be able to lunge it down the inside? But as we see every single season with Monaco, this is not the case. The track is too small, and there just isn't room to overtake if the driver doesn't let you. Lando could have gone another 3 seconds slower, and still Leclerc wouldn't have been able to overtake unless he got super lucky. Mercedes had a tragic race. I mean, they ended up pitting their first pit stop on lap 65, and it's just a weekend to forget. A retirement in qualifying, Kimi into the barrier. He didn't even speak on the radio after the race. It was tragic. Lando ends up winning the race. This two-stop strategy did not work out. It made for brilliant strategies amongst Racing Bulls and Williams, but that is what made this race so horrible to watch. This truly isn't racing, and as Carlos Sainz even stated, this is not the way I like to race and I dream about racing in Monaco. Now obviously, he's over-exaggerating a little bit as well, but truly this was a very bad race to watch. There was no real action, and it was pretty much anti-F1 as Jolyon Palmer talked about on the commentary. While there was some pushing, there was not much intrigue in this race, and you knew what was going to happen before it even happened, so there was no suspense as well. I do defend Monaco being on our track calendar because I love the Saturday. It really is an amazing event, but Sunday is such a snooze fest and something needs to change. They got to change up a bit of the track. They make enough money over there. It's a very wealthy area. I think they can invest a little bit in changing this crazy historic track. Maybe 2026 is going to be a little bit better with narrower cars and much less dirty air being kicked off, but it's hard to tell. This track is just too small, and I believe change really needs to happen. So the two-stop, it was a failure. It didn't really change much for the Monaco GP. The same outcome as we know it. The ones that qualify ahead will stay ahead unless something crazy happens. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments down below. Talk about this race for me. There's not much to go over, at least from the racing aspect, but Fernando Alonso, of course, retiring. Mercedes, complete failure in the strategy. And also, if you haven't already, go check the website. All the results should be in at this time. Over 700 of you joined, which was just amazing, and thank you so much for that. Please leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.